The old Mustang sputtered, coughed, and died, its final breath echoing in the still night air. Silence, heavy and absolute, swallowed the engine's last gasp, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, heart a drum in her chest, each beat louder than the last. "No," she breathed, fear crawling up her throat like a living thing. "Not here, not on this road, not now." Outside, the highway stretched before them, a black ribbon winding through dense, silent woods, the trees standing like sentinels. The setting sun bled crimson through the trees, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to reach out and touch the car. Beside her, David swore under his breath, the sharp sound cutting through the eerie stillness like a knife. "Damn car," he muttered, already reaching for the door handle. "We'll have to walk. There's no other choice." Sarah's hand flew out, clutching his arm with a grip of iron. "No!" she hissed, her voice tight with panic. "Don't you dare leave the car, David. Not at night, not on this road." David frowned, his brow furrowed with concern. He tried to smile to reassure her, but the fear in her eyes stopped him short, making him hesitate. "Sarah, it's okay," he began, his voice gentle and soothing. "It's just a flat tire. We'll change it and be on our way." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. "Don't you say it, David." Sarah's voice was sharp, desperate. "Don't you dare say it's just a road. This is Highway 13, for God's sake. The Devil's Highway." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. He knew Sarah was terrified of this road, of its dark reputation, the whispers of strange occurrences, accidents, disappearances, but he didn't believe in ghost stories. He squeezed her hand, his touch firm, reassuring. "Listen, Sarah, it's just a road. Asphalt and concrete. There's nothing to be afraid of." But even as he spoke, a shiver ran down his spine. The silence was too complete, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. It felt as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, watching, waiting. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, and darkness fell like a shroud. The headlights flickered and died, plunging them into an abyss of black. Sarah gasped, her grip on his hand tightening painfully. "We're stuck," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden, frantic thumping of her heart. "We're really stuck." David fumbled in the glove compartment for a torch, his movements jerky, adrenaline surging through him. He found it, flicked it on, but the weak beam barely pierced the oppressive darkness pressing in on them. A low moan drifted through the trees, carried on the night wind. Sarah flinched, her eyes widening. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. David strained to listen, his senses on high alert. "Just the wind," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The sound was too mournful, too human to be just the wind. Another moan, closer this time, followed by a soft, shuffling sound. Something was out there, moving through the trees, just beyond the reach of the torch's weak beam. Fear, cold and clammy, tightened its grip on David's chest. His breath came in short, ragged gasps as he tried to steady himself. He told himself it was just an animal, a fox or a raccoon, but deep down a primal instinct whispered otherwise. The night was too still, too quiet. This road, this place had a reputation. Stories of strange sightings and eerie encounters were whispered among locals. A darkness that clung to it like a shroud, wrapping everything in an unsettling silence. Then, through the swirling mist of his fear, he saw it. A shape, barely discernible at first, but growing clearer with each passing second. A figure, tall and gaunt, silhouetted against the backdrop of the dark woods. It seemed to absorb the light, making the darkness around it even more profound. It stood at the edge of the road, its features obscured by the shadows. An air of malevolence seemed to emanate from it. "Sarah," David breathed, his voice a strangled whisper. "Look." His heart pounded louder, each beat echoing in his ears. Sarah followed his gaze, her hand flying to her mouth, stifling a scream. Her eyes widened in terror as she saw the figure. The figure began to move then, gliding towards them with an unnatural grace, its arm outstretched, beckoning. It moved as if it were floating, defying the laws of nature. David's hand instinctively reached for the car door handle. His fingers trembled as they wrapped around the cold metal. He had to get them out of there, had to get Sarah to safety. The urgency in his movements mirrored the panic in his mind, but as his fingers closed around the cold metal, the figure stopped. It was as if it sensed his intentions. Its head tilted, as if it were listening, and then it turned and vanished back into the trees. The night swallowed it whole, leaving only the echo of their fear behind. What was that? Sarah whispered, her voice barely a tremor in the silence that descended once more. David didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. He had never believed in ghosts, in the supernatural. But what he had just witnessed defied rational explanation. Suddenly, two blinding headlights pierced the darkness, momentarily blinding them. A truck, its engine a guttural roar, screeched to a halt behind their car. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over David. Thank God, he breathed. Help is here. He pushed open the car door and stepped out, raising his hands in a gesture of reassurance. "Hey," he called out, his voice hoarse with relief. "We need some help here. Our car broke down." The truck driver, a burly man with a weathered face, leaned out of the window. "You folks are in a right spot of trouble stopping here at night," he said, his voice gruff. "This road ain't no place to be after dark." "We know," David said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Our car just died on us." The night was eerily silent, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. "Could you maybe give us a tow to the nearest town?" David's voice wavered slightly, betraying his anxiety. The driver hesitated, his eyes flickering from David to Sarah, still huddled inside the car. Her eyes were wide with fear, reflecting the dim light from the truck's headlights. "Well now," he drawled, "I reckon I could do that." His voice was slow, almost too casual, as if he was weighing his options. "But this here's a lonely stretch of road." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Might be some unsavory characters about. David's blood ran cold. The driver's tone was almost mocking, as if he knew something they didn't. The driver's words, spoken with a knowing glint in his eye, echoed the chilling encounter they had just experienced. It was as if he was hinting at something more sinister. He glanced back at the car, at Sarah's pale, terrified face, and a surge of protectiveness washed over him. He couldn't let anything happen to her. "Don't worry," the driver said, his tone too smooth, too reassuring. It was the kind of reassurance that felt forced, almost practiced. "I'll take good care of you folks, just get in." The invitation sounded more like a command, leaving David with a sense of dread. Something in his voice, in the way his eyes lingered on Sarah, sent a shiver down David's spine. It was as if the driver saw them as prey. A sudden terrifying thought struck him. What if they were walking into a trap? What if this wasn't help? What if this was a setup, a ploy to lure them into something dangerous? What if this was another story for the legend of Highway 13? The thought was chilling, and David knew they had to be careful. He spun around, his hand reaching for Sarah, urging her back into the car, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "Get back!" he shouted, his voice raw with panic. "Get back in the car!" But it was too late. The truck driver, his face contorted in a grotesque parody of a smile, slammed his foot down on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, its massive grille filling David's vision. Then darkness and the echoing silence of the haunted highway.